may sew for this family, but you will never marry my son. Then ask your lawyer why my mother's name is on this estate.
What? Mom?
This development cannot continue without Wairimu's legal consent. I did not come to take your home. I came to stop you from selling mine. Before you announce tomorrow's project, read the name written inside that file.
Mother, did the company know about
She
this?
calmly placed an old legal envelope beside the estate plans and replied, "Before you announce tomorrow's development, ask your lawyer why my mother's name appears on the land documents." Before this story begins, tell us which city you're watching from in the comments. Wairimu Njeri unlocked the glass door of Njeri Thread and Form, her modest fashion studio in Kilimani, Nairobi. Cool air carrying the scent of damp earth and freshly roasted coffee drifted in from the cafe across the street. Pale sunlight passed through the front windows and fell across shelves filled with chitinge fabric in turmeric yellow, emerald green, coral red, and deep burgundy. The geometric patterns seemed to awaken with the room. At the center of the studio stood a wide wooden cutting table. A half-finished evening gown rested beneath sheets of pattern paper surrounded by steel scissors, tilted chalks, boxes of pins, and a notebook whose corners had softened from years of use. Beside the sewing machines, 3 mannequins wore colorful jackets, shaped with elegant shoulders and hand-beaded collars. The studio was not large, but everything had its place. Wairimu set down her handbag, removed her cream jacket, and placed a faded yellow measuring tape around her neck. Several numbers had nearly disappeared, yet she had never considered replacing it. The tape had belonged to her mother, who had taught her to sew straight seams on an old foot-powered machine in Aunt Ruth's house. Her mother used to say that a beautiful garment did not begin with expensive fabric. It began with listening. Wairimu switched on the lamp above her work table and examined the day's orders. Her hand stopped when she reached a name written carefully in blue ink: Beatrice Musoni. Beneath it were instructions for a structured turquoise silk jacket with a high collar, hand-beaded sleeves, and a border inspired by traditional Maasai jewelry. The design was elegant without being excessive, powerful without appearing severe. It was the first order Wairimu had received from Kamau's mother. That fact alone made her normally steady hands hesitate. The back door opened and Ashien Odiambo entered carrying 2 cups of milk tea. At 28, as the studio's most talented embroidery artist, she wore a bright orange kanga scarf around her hair and a cobalt blue dress that moved lightly around her ankles. "You arrived before me again," Ashien said, placing the tea on the table. "I am beginning to suspect that you sleep between the fabric shelves." Wairimu smiled. "If I slept here, I could stop paying rent on my apartment. But you would hear sewing machines in your dreams." "I already do." Ashin laughed before turning toward the turquoise jacket hanging beside the window. "Is that for Mrs. Muthoni?" Wairimu nodded. Achia stepped closer and studied the delicate beadwork along the collar. Each bead had been placed by hand, forming a subtle pattern of circles and crossing lines. "It is beautiful enough to silence the most demanding woman in Nairobi. Do not place too much faith in the power of embroidery. I placed my faith in your hands." Wairimu did not answer. She adjusted one bead that leaned slightly away from the others, although no customer would have noticed it. To her, quality was not something a client should have to demand. It was a promise the craftswoman made to herself. The bell above the entrance rang. A woman wearing a pale gray suit hurried inside with a leather folder pressed against her chest. Her name was Lillian Chebet, a 34-year-old administrative officer at an insurance company nearby and one of Wairimu's regular clients. "Wairimu, please tell me you can save this." Lillian placed a navy jacket on the cutting table. A long tear ran beneath one sleeve, and part of the inner lining had separated from the seam. "I have an interview for a promotion," Leah explained. "This is the only suit I own that makes me look like I belong in a boardroom." Another tailor said I would have to leave it for several days. Wairimu examined the damage. "Have you tried it on since it tore?" "Yes, it still fits, but the fabric pulls here. Put it on." Lillian slipped into the jacket. Wairimu stood behind her, adjusted the shoulders, examined the armhole, and marked the damaged area with white chalk. Your left shoulder sits slightly lower than your right, Warimu said. That is normal, but the original jacket it was not adjusted to your shape. All the pressure has been falling on this seam. Can you repair it? Yes. How much will it cost? Werimu looked at Lillian's anxious face. She knew the woman had been preparing for this opportunity for months. She also knew Lillian was helping her mother pay for two treatments in Nakuru. The studio needed every shilling it could earn. Still, not every decision deserved to be reduced to an invoice. Pay for the new lining, Werimu said. I will not charge you for the repair. Lillian immediately shook her head. No, this is your work, and this is your opportunity. You have rent, salaries, and suppliers to pay. When you receive the promotion, come back and order a new suit. I will charge you properly then. Lillian stared at her before an emotional smile spread across her face. You always find a clever way to make people owe you. No, Warmo replied. I am building long-term customer loyalty. All three women laughed. For a moment, the studio felt warmer, even though the numbers in Warimu's expense book had not changed. While Lillian waited near the fitting mirrors, Warimu began removing the damaged lining. Achieng sat across the room and continued attaching beads to Beatrice Muthoni's jacket. Are you worried about the family dinner? Achieng asked. Werimu kept her eyes on the seam. Kamau said it is only dinner. Sentences beginning with only are rarely simple. You watch too many dramas. And you are dating the son of one of Nairobi's most influential property families. I am not dating his company. The company probably sits at the dinner table with him. There was no cruelty in Achien's voice. That made the observation harder to dismiss. Kamau Muthoni had never used money to impress Werimu. He had first entered a studio with a torn shirt cuff and waited patiently on an old wooden chair while she repaired it. He had asked where her fabrics came from, remembered Achieng's name, and listened when Waemu spoke about expanding the studio. He had never treated her work like a hobby, but a decent man could still belong to a family that did not consider her an equal. Werimu understood that. She simply did not know whether Kamau understood it too. A polished black vehicle stopped outside the studio. Kamau stepped out wearing a charcoal suit without a tie. He carried a white bakery box under one arm and looked through the window before opening the door. I brought a bribe, he announced. Achieng glanced at the box. You may enter. Kamau placed it on the table and turned to Werimu. Have you eaten? I had tea. Tea is not breakfast. In this studio, tea counts as a food group. He shook his head, but his expression softened. Werimu always noticed that change in him when the strategic director disappeared and only the man she loved remained. Kama examined the turquoise jacket. It looks better than the sketch. It still needs work around the sleeves. My mother will love it. Werimu set down her needle. Does she know who designed it? I told her the name of your studio. That was not my question. Kamal paused. The hesitation lasted only a moment, but she saw it. She knows I am seeing you, he said. And? She wants to meet you at dinner. Achieng quietly carried Lillian's jacket to another table, giving them privacy without leaving the room. Werimu looked directly at Kamau. Does she want to meet me as the designer of her jacket or as the woman who is dating her son? Both. Are you certain? Kamau pulled out a chair and sat across from her. My mother can be demanding. She cares deeply about the family, the business, and how everything is perceived. That is a very graceful description of someone who likes control. He released a slow breath, but did not disagree. I do not want to mislead you. She has certain expectations about the woman you should marry, about almost everything. Werimu touched the measuring tape around her neck. She had measured hundreds of women with different bodies, ages, and social positions. None of them were the same, but nearly all wanted one thing, to be seen as they truly were, rather than forced into a shape someone else had chosen. I will attend, she said. Relief appeared on Kamal's face, but Werimu did not smile. I am not going there to ask for your mother's approval. I am going because I need to understand how the woman who raised you measures the value of other people. Werimu, and you need to understand something too. Kamal waited. If she dislikes my profession, my clothes, or my background, that is her choice. But I will not sit quietly while anyone treats me as though I am begging for permission to enter your life. Kamal studied her for several seconds. I understand. Werimu wanted to believe him. Before leaving, Kamau ordered a jacket for himself and promised to accompany her to his family's home. His hand rested briefly on her shoulder, tender and reassuring, yet something inside Weremo remained unsettled. It felt like a loose thread beneath expensive fabric. After he left, she returned to the cutting table. Achieng did not ask what she was thinking. She simply opened the bakery box, placed a pastry beside her, and continued working. Warim looked at Beatrice's turquoise jacket. Every seam was balanced. Every bead caught the light. She had spent days creating something that would help the older woman enter any room feeling powerful, elegant, and respected. She wondered whether Beatrice Mufoni knew how to give those same feelings to someone else. Werimu picked up her needle. A beautiful garment could change the way a woman stood, but it could not change the way she saw the world. Wairimu Njeri stepped out of Kamal's car in front of the Muthoni family villa in Karen, Nairobi. The house rose behind a row of sculpted acacia trees, its glass walls glowing above broad terraces of pale stone. Warm light spilled from the entrance and caught the gold embroidery on Werimu's turmeric yellow dress, which she had designed with a fitted waistcoat, flowing sleeves, and a narrow border of deep green kitenge fabric. Kamal walked around the car and offered her his hand. "You look beautiful," he said. Wairimu accepted his hand but kept her eyes on the house. Beautiful enough for dinner. Beautiful enough for any room. That was not what I asked. Kamal paused before giving her a careful smile. "My mother will appreciate the effort." Wairimu looked at him. "I did not dress for your mother's approval." I know. She hoped he did. The entrance opened before they reached it. A house manager wearing a charcoal suit greeted Kamal warmly and welcomed Werimu with professional politeness. Inside, the villa smelled faintly of polished wood, white lilies, and roasted spices. The foyer had a double-height ceiling, a floating staircase, and a large painting of women carrying woven baskets across a red landscape. Every object appeared expensive. Nothing appeared accidental. Beatrice Muthoni stood near the living room in the turquoise silk jacket Werimu had made for her. The high collar framed her face beautifully, while the hand-beaded sleeves caught the light each time she moved. She paired it with an ivory skirt and gold earrings shaped like acacia leaves. For one brief moment, Werimu felt proud. Then Beatrice's eyes moved from her face to her dress, shoes, handbag, and back again. "So," Beatrice said, "you are Werimu." Werimu approached with composed smile. "Yes, Mrs. Muthoni. It is good to meet you properly." Beatrice touched the collar of her jacket. "You have skilled hands." "Thank you. The collar suits you." "I know." The answer was not openly rude, but it left no warmth behind. A second woman rose from a cream sofa near the windows. She was tall, poised, and dressed in a coral red gown with delicate beadwork along one shoulder. Her hair was arranged in long, polished braids, and a slim gold bracelet rested against her wrist. "Werimu, this is Zawadi Naliaka," Beatrice said. "She directs communications for the Naliaka Meridian Fund." Zawadi extended her hand. "I have heard about your studio." Werimu shook it. "Good things, I hope, only that it is difficult to get an appointment." "That is a good problem for a small business." Zawadi smiled sincerely. "It usually is." Kamal moved closer to Werimu, but Beatrice had already turned toward two men standing near the terrace doors. She introduced them as investment partners involved in the family's newest development. Their conversation quickly shifted towards land values, luxury housing, and international investors. Werimu listened without pretending to understand every detail. She noticed, however, that Beatrice never mentioned the people already living or working on the land being discussed. The dining room overlooked a wide garden illuminated by low golden lamps. A long table had been set with hand-painted ceramic plates, crystal glasses, and arrangements of white orchids mixed with green foliage. The meal combined traditional Kenyan flavors with modern presentation. Sliced nyama choma, smooth mukimo shaped into neat rounds, sautéed sukuma wiki, spiced vegetables, and sauces served in small copper bowls. Werimu admired the care behind the presentation. She also noticed the seating arrangement. Kamal's chair was beside Zawadi's. Werimu's place had been set across from them, next to one of the investors. It might have been innocent, but Beatrice Mutuni did not appear to do anything without intention. Once everyone was seated, the conversation began with business. Beatrice described a planned residential project in Karen, featuring private gardens, wellness facilities, and residencies designed for international executives. Kamal will oversee the strategic development, she said. Zawadi's fund is considering the hospitality and lifestyle component. Zawadi lifted her glass slightly. We are still reviewing the proposal. Of course, Beatrice replied, but the partnership would be natural. Our families have known each other for years. Her gaze moved briefly between Zawadi and Kamal. Wairimu saw it, so did Kamal. Mama, he said, this is dinner, not a board presentation. Successful families rarely separate the two. One of the investors laughed politely. Beatrice then turned to Wairimu. And your studio, she said. How many people do you employ? 3 full-time artisans and 2 independent specialists when we have larger orders. Only 3. 3 people whose salaries I can pay reliably. Beatrice placed her fork beside her plate. Do you own the property? I lease the space. And your home? I rent an apartment near the studio. Beatrice nodded as though completing an invisible financial assessment. Your parents left you no property? Kamal shifted in his chair. Mama, that is personal. I am making conversation. Werimu looked directly at Beatrice. My mother passed away and I was raised by my aunt. Whatever my family left me was not in the form of a villa. The table became quieter. Beatrice did not apologize. And do you intend to remain a seamstress permanently? Werimu rested her hands calmly in her lap. I intend to remain a designer and business owner. Sewing is one part of the work. Those occupations are not always the same. No, Werimu agreed. Some designers create sketches. Some understand what happens after the sketch reaches another woman's hands. Zawadi lowered her eyes, hiding a small smile. Beatrice noticed. I admire ambition, she continued. But creative businesses can be unpredictable. A household requires stability. Werimu glanced at Kamal. He looked uncomfortable, but discomfort was not the same as courage. My business has paid its staff and suppliers without missing an obligation, Werimu said. That is the kind of stability I understand. Beatrice lifted her water glass. For now, the words were soft. The judgment was not. Kamal finally leaned forward. Werimu did not come here to defend her financial statements. No one asked her to defend anything, Beatrice replied. I am simply trying to understand the woman you have brought into this family's private life. Then ask about her character. Character does not pay mortgages. Werimu felt a slow heat rising beneath her skin, but she refused to let anger choose her words. Neither does family prestige if the numbers are poor. One of the investors coughed into his hand. Zawadi looked toward Werimu with open interest. Beatrice's expression tightened. Kamal tells me you are talented. He has seen my work. He is also generous when he cares about someone. I do not need generosity to know whether my work is good. The room fell silent again. Kamal reached for Werimu's hand beneath the table, but she moved to lift her glass before he could touch her. She did not want comfort hidden beneath linen while she faced humiliation in full view. Beatrice changed the subject with practiced elegance. She began discussing the current development against it, asking Zawadi about an upcoming investor reception. She spoke of Kama and Zawadi attending together, meeting regional partners, and presenting the project as the beginning of a new era for both families. Werimu was still sitting at the table, yet Beatrice spoke as though she had disappeared. Zawadi placed her fork down. I believe Kamal should decide whom he attends with. Beatrice gave her a measured look. It is a professional event. Then his companion should be chosen for professional reasons, not family symbolism. Kamal nodded. Zawadi is right. Beatrice's jaw hardened. I am discussing business, and I am asking you not to use business to arrange my personal life, Kamal replied. Werimu studied him. It was the first clear resistance he had shown since they entered the house. It came late, but it came. The remainder of the meal continued with controlled politeness. Beatrice asked no more questions about Werimu's family, but her silence had its own sharpness. Werimu spoke with Zawadi about Kenyan fashion, ethical sourcing, and the difficulty women-owned brands faced when seeking commercial space in premium developments. The landlords praised local creativity. Werimu said, until a local designer asks for terms that allow her business to survive, Zawadi nodded. Then they call the business too small or too risky, even when they have given larger companies years to become profitable. Beatrice listened from the end of the table. She said nothing. When the meal ended, Koma walked Werimu through the garden toward the waiting car. The night air was cooler there, scented with trimmed grass and jasmine. For several steps, neither of them spoke. I am sorry, he finally said. Werimu stopped. For what? For my mother's questions, for the way she spoke to you. You did not ask those questions. No, but I brought you here. And then you watched her examine me like an application. That is not fair, isn't it? Kamau looked away toward the illuminated windows of the villa. I challenged her. After she had already asked about my income, my property, my family, and whether my profession could support a household, I was trying not to make the evening worse. Werimu's voice remained calm. For whom? He looked back at her. She continued before he could answer. I do not need you to apologize on your mother's behalf. I need to know what you will do when she behaves this way again. She will calm down once she knows you. That is not an answer. Werimu? No, you believe time will solve this because you are not the person being measured and found unsuitable. Kamal stepped closer. I love you. I know. The reply surprised him. Werimu's expression softened, but her words did not. Love matters, Kamal. But love that remains quiet whenever respect becomes inconvenient asks one person to carry too much. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no easy defense. Werimu entered the car and looked through the window at Beatrice's glowing villa. The jacket she had sewn looked magnificent beneath those lights. Every bead sat exactly where it belonged, every seam shaped to honor the woman wearing it. Yet Werimu had spent the evening in a room where no place had truly been prepared for her. Kamal sat beside her without speaking, and his silence hurt more than his mother's questions. Werimu Njeri stood beside the cutting table at Njeri Thread and Form, studying the email on her tablet for the third time. Sunlight poured through the glass storefront, brightening the coral, emerald, and indigo fabrics arranged along the studio walls. Around her, sewing machines hummed steadily. Scissors moved through silk, and the scent of hot steam rose from the pressing station. The studio looked alive. Werimu felt as though something inside her had stopped. The message came from the organizing committee of the Nairobi Women in Enterprise Gala. Her studio had been commissioned to create 32 custom garments for speakers, hosts, and award recipients. The contract was worth 1,684,000 Kenyan shillings, enough to cover wages, materials, rent, and the first payment on an industrial embroidery machine Werimu had planned to purchase. Now the order had been cancelled. The explanation was only 3 sentences long. The committee claimed it had decided to move in a different creative direction. It thanked Werimu for her early concepts and promised to consider her for future opportunities. There was no mention of the fabric already ordered. There was no mention of the fittings already completed. There was no mention of the deposit that had still not arrived. Achieng stood across the table, holding a strip of embroidered fabric. She had been watching Werimu's expression change with every line. What happened? She asked. They cancelled the gala contract. Achieng's hand fell slowly to her side. All of it? All 32 garments, but they approved the designs. I know. They chose the fabrics. I know. And we turned away other work because they demanded priority. Werimu locked the tablet screen. I know that too. Achieng stared at the shelves, where rolls of specially ordered silk and hand-woven cotton were stacked. Some colors had been dyed exclusively for the collection. Several independent artisans had already begun producing beadwork based on Werimu's sketches. This makes no sense, Achieng said. Did they give a reason? A different creative direction? That is not a reason. That is a sentence people use when they do not want to tell the truth. Werimu turned toward the office desk and opened the contract file. She read the cancellation clause carefully, though she already knew it. Without the first deposit, the committee had room to withdraw. Werimu had allowed production to begin because the event coordinator had assured her the transfer was being processed. She had trusted the relationship. That trust now sat on the shelves in the form of fabric she could not return. The bell above the door rang. Lillian Chebet entered wearing the navy suit Werimu had repaired. The jacket now followed the shape of her shoulders without pulling, and her expression carried a confidence that had not been there during her previous visit. I came to tell you before anyone else, Lillian said. I received the promotion. Asieng forced a smile that deserved celebration. Warimu stepped forward and embraced her. I knew you would. Lillian laughed softly. You knew before I did. She looked between the two women and noticed the tension. What is wrong? Werimu hesitated, but Asieng answered. The gala cancelled its entire order. Lillian's smile disappeared. The Nairobi Women in Enterprise Gala. Yes, that is strange. Why? Werimu asked. Lillian lowered her voice. My company is one of the event sponsors. We received an updated vendor list this morning. Another design house has taken the clothing contract. Which one? Maison Naliaka. Achieng's eyebrows rose. Zawadi Naliaka's family owns part of that company. Lillian looked uncomfortable. I did not know that. Werimu did. She also knew Beatrice Muthoni sat on the gala's advisory committee. The room became quiet except for the sewing machines. Achieng folded her arms. You attended dinner at that woman's house, and now your largest contract disappears into the hands of the family she once connected to her son. We do not know that Beatrice caused it. We know enough to ask. Werimu looked toward the studio entrance. She disliked accusations built on suspicion. They were easy to make and difficult to take back. Yet the timing, the advisory committee, and the replacement vendor formed a pattern she could not dismiss. I will contact the event coordinator, she said. No, Ashieng replied. Call Kamau. This is my business, and his mother may be interfering with it. That is exactly why I will handle it myself. Lillian placed a hand on Wairimu's arm. Whatever happened, do not let them make you doubt the quality of your work. Wairimu managed a small smile. Today was supposed to be about your promotion. It still can be. I came to order the suit you promised to charge me for. Achieng glanced at the cancelled fabrics. Perhaps something brighter than navy. Lillian touched a roll of coral fabric. Something that says, I have stopped asking permission. Werimu studied the collar and nodded. That I can make. After Lillian left, Werimu called the gala coordinator. The woman apologized repeatedly, but refused to discuss who had recommended the change. She described it as a collective decision and promised the committee would reimburse documented material costs after review. It was carefully polished language. It offered no accountability. Werimu ended the call and placed her tablet on the table. Achieng watched her. She knows who pressured them. Yes, and she will not say nope. Before Achieng could respond, a black luxury vehicle stopped outside. The driver stepped out first, then opened the rear door. Beatrice Muthoni emerged wearing a violet silk dress beneath a white structured coat. A gold brooch shaped like an acacia branch rested near her collar. Her appearance was elegant, controlled, and completely unsuited to the discomfort she brought into the room. She entered without waiting to be invited. Werimu, she said, I hope I am not interrupting. You are. Beatrice's gaze moved toward Akieng. I would prefer to speak privately. Akieng remained where she was. This studio belongs to Werimu, and I work here. Werimu gave her a calm look. It is all right. Give us a few minutes. Ashin gathered her embroidery frame but leaned close to Werimu before walking toward the back room. Call me if respect leaves before she does. Beatrice heard every word. Her expression did not change. When they were alone, she placed a cream leather folder on the cutting table. Werimu did not offer her a chair. I assume you heard about the gala, Beatrice said. I did. It was a business decision. Was it yours? Beatrice removed her gloves one finger at a time. I advised the committee that a larger fashion house would be better equipped to manage an event of that scale. My studio was approved after our capacity review. Committees sometimes make emotional decisions in the name of supporting small businesses, and powerful people sometimes call interference advice. Beatrice held Werimu's gaze. This reaction is precisely why I wanted us to speak. She opened the leather folder and slid a document across the table. It was a proposed consulting agreement between Warimu Studio and Muthoni Urban Estates. The figure printed on the first page was generous, too generous. The company offered to retain Werimu as a private designer for selected corporate events. The arrangement included payment for the gala materials, a 6-month design fee, and access to a retail space in one of Muthoni's commercial properties. Werimu turned the page. Near the end, what was a confidentiality clause. Beneath it sat a condition requiring her to avoid personal contact with Kama during the term of the agreement. She looked up. You came to buy my absence. I came to offer you an opportunity that requires me to stop seeing your son. The two matters are connected, only because you connected them. Beatrice's voice remained smooth. You are talented, Warimu. I have never denied that. But talent does not automatically make someone suitable for every role. What role have I applied for? You know what I mean? No, say it clearly. Beatrice closed the folder halfway. My son belongs to a family with responsibilities, expectations, and relationships that extend beyond personal affection. The woman beside him will enter boardrooms, diplomatic receptions, and investment circles. She must understand that her choices affect more than herself. Werimu looked around the studio, at the garments waiting to be finished, at the women whose work depended on the business, at the fabrics purchased for a contract Beatrice had helped remove. You believe I do not understand responsibility because I work with my hands. I believe your world is different from ours. Your jacket was made in my world. Beatrice's eyes hardened slightly, and I paid for it. You paid for the garment. You did not purchase the right to measure my worth. Beatrice pushed the document closer. This agreement could transform your business. You could move into a premium location, hire more staff, and serve clients you currently cannot reach. And the price is Kamal. The price is accepting reality. Werimu picked up the document. For a moment, Beatrice seemed to believe she was considering it. Instead, Werimu folded it once and placed it back inside the leather folder. You can hire my skill, she said. You cannot buy my disappearing. Beatrice's expression cooled. Pride is expensive. So is control. You may think refusing me proves strength, but business is built on access. Suppliers, landlords, committees, investors, people speak to one another. The threat was quiet. That made it clearer. Werimu stepped closer to the table. If another contract disappears because I refuse to leave your son, then this is no longer about whether I am suitable for your family. It is about whether you are suitable to hold the power people have given you. For the first time, Beatrice looked genuinely offended. You should be careful. I am being careful. That is why I am listening closely. Beatrice put on her gloves, lifted the folder, and turned toward the door. Kamal will eventually understand that love cannot build a future by itself. Werimu's voice stopped her. Perhaps, but a future built by humiliating women will not stand forever either. Beatrice left without answering. Aching returned from the back room and looked through the glasses as the vehicle pulled away. What did she want? To place me on her company payroll. Aching's face brightened with surprise, then darkened as Wairamu explained the condition. She cancelled the gala contract and arrived with money? Yes, she did not even bother to hide it. She believes power makes honesty unnecessary. The bell rang again. This time, Koma entered. His expression showed that his mother had already called him. Werimu, can we talk? Achien glanced between them. I will be in the back. When she left, Kamal approached the cutting table. My mother told me about the agreement. Did she also tell you how the gala chose a new designer? She said she made a recommendation. She removed nearly 2 million shillings of work from my studio and then offered to replace it if I stopped seeing you. Kamal rubbed his forehead. She should not have connected business with our relationship. That is all you have to say? I am not defending her. You are making her actions sound like poor judgment. They were deliberate. She believes she is protecting the family. Werimu stared at him. From what? Kamal did not answer. From me? She asked. From my rented studio? from my aunt's small house, from the possibility that people may see you with a woman who earns her money one garment at a time. That is not what I believe, but you still describe what she did as protection. Kamau stepped closer. I will speak to her. You have spoken to her before. I will make her understand. No, Kamau, I need you to understand. Her voice remained steady, though the weight behind it grew heavier. Your mother did not only insult me, she used her influence to damage the livelihoods of everyone working here. Achieng did not attend your family dinner. Our suppliers did not ask to date you, yet they are paying for your mother's disapproval. Kamau looked towards the shelves of gala fabric. For the first time, the consequences appeared larger than the conflict between three people. Werimu removed the yellow measuring tape from her neck and placed it on the table. I need distance from this relationship. His face changed. Do not make this decision because of her. I am making it because of us. I love you and I love you. But I cannot remain beside a man who asks me to be patient while his family punishes me for existing. I never asked you to tolerate this. You asked me to believe you would handle it. Nothing changed. Kamal lowered his voice. What do you want me to do? Werimu looked at him sadly. That is the problem. You are still asking me to teach you how to protect something you claim matters to you. He stood silently. She walked to the door and opened it. Kampa looked as though he wanted to argue, but something in her expressions stopped him. He left without touching her, without making another promise, and without asking when he could return. After the door closed, Werimu stood beside the glass for several breaths. Then she turned back toward the studio. The cancelled fabrics still filled the shelves. Bills still waited on her artists. 3 employees still trusted her to make decisions that protected their work. Her heart was broken. Her responsibilities were not. Werimu placed the yellow measuring tape around her neck again and called Achieng back into the room. We will redesign the gala collection, she said. For whom? For ourselves. Achieng studied her face before nodding. Together, they unrolled the first length of coral silk across the table. Beatrice Muthoni had tried to turn Werimu's work into a weapon against her. Werimu would turn it into proof that she could survive. Werimu Ninjeri sat at the dining table in Aunt Ruth's modern townhouse near Karen, surrounded by old folders, folded receipts, and photographs that smelled faintly of dust and cedar wood. Rain clouds pressed low beyond the wide windows, while warm pendant lights reflected across the polished floor and the colorful woven baskets arranged along the wall. Ruth Wambui placed a legal notice beside Werimu's hand. They want us out, she said. Werimu read the document again. Muthoni Heritage Residencies plan to redevelop the land where Ruth's townhouse, her fabric supply shop, and several artisan workshops stood. Residents had been given instructions to present proof of occupancy before relocation terms were discussed. Did anyone speak to you before sending this? Werimu asked. No, a man delivered it and asked me to sign for the envelope. Ruth lowered herself into the chair opposite her. She wore a flowing kitenge dress in plum and gold, but her usually bright expression had been replaced by quiet concern. I have paid every fee they requested, she continued. I repaired the roof myself. I improved the shop. Now they speak as if I have been borrowing my own life. Werimu folded the notice carefully. Do you have the original lease? I have copies somewhere. Your mother kept most of the older papers. My mother? Ruth looked toward the tall cabinet near the stairs. She handled family documents better than I did. Even when she was ill, she labeled everything. Werimu followed her gaze. Why have you never shown them to me? Because I believe they were only memories. Ruth stood and opened the cabinet. From the lowest shelf, she pulled out a rectangular wooden box with brass corners. The surface had darkened with age, and a small carved flower marked the lid. Werimu recognized it immediately. That was hers. Yes. Ruth placed the box on the table. For several moments, Werimu did not touch it. Her mother's belongings had always carried a strange weight. They made her feel close to the woman she still missed. Yet, they also reminded her how much of that woman's life remained unknown. Ruth rested a hand on her shoulder. You do not have to open it tonight. Yes, I do. Werimu lifted the lid. Inside lay neatly tied bundles of letters, tax receipts, faded photographs, and folded maps. A length of white ribbon held several official-looking documents together. Beneath them rested a small velvet case. Werimu opened it and found the original metal box that had once held her mother's yellow measuring tape. The tape itself now hung around Werimu's neck. She turned the case over. Words had been engraved on the underside, Karanja and Mugo advocates. "Do you know that name?" Werimu asked. Ruth leaned closer. "It was a law firm in Nairobi. Your mother visited them more than once." "For what?" She never explained clearly. She said she was trying to correct something connected to your grandfather. Werimi began examining the papers. One document contained a hand-drawn boundary map of the current property. Another showed payments made into something called the Njeri Kimani Family Land Trust. Several receipts carried her mother's full name, Mutoni Waithera Njeri. Werimu's breathing slowed. "Why is my mother's name on these land records?" Ruth sat down again. "I knew your grandfather once held an interest in this property. I believed it was sold after his death." Believed? That was what the family was told. Weremu unfolded another page. It appeared to be a beneficiary statement, but some sections were difficult to read. Her mother's name stood beside a percentage, 46. She looked up sharply. "Did she own part of this land?" "I do not know. That is nearly half. It may not mean ownership in the way you think." "Then, what does it mean?" Ruth's eyes filled with regret. "I should have asked more questions." Werimu rose from the table and walked toward the window. Outside, the garden lamps cast soft circles over the wet stone path. The houses and workshops beyond the wall had existed for decades, occupied by tailors, beadworkers, furniture makers, and families who had built businesses from small rooms. Now the Musoni company planned to replace them with luxury residences, and Werimu's mother's name was hidden inside the history of the land. Ruth approached quietly. "Do not let hope carry you too far before the documents are checked. I am not thinking up money." "What are you thinking about my mother?" Werimu turned, gripping the beneficiary statement. "She spent years teaching me to respect what other people built with their hands. What if she was fighting to protect something her own family had built?" Ruth looked down. "Then we must find the truth." Werimo gathered the most relevant documents into a clean folder. She photographed the remaining pages and arranged everything exactly as she had found it. At the bottom of the box, she discovered a sealed envelope addressed in her mother's handwriting. "For Werimu when she is ready to understand." Her fingers trembled slightly. "Open it," Ruth whispered. Werimu broke the seal. The letter inside was brief. Her mother wrote that the family land had become tangled in agreements she did not fully trust. She had begun working with a lawyer to protect Werimu's future, but had not completed the process. She warned her daughter not to confuse inheritance with entitlement. The final lines held Werimu still. "Land can feed pride as easily as it feeds families. If anything remains for you, do not ask only what it is worth. Ask who may be harmed by the way you use it." Ruth wiped a tear from her cheek. "She knew you." Werimu folded the letter carefully. She knew the choice might become mine. She picked up her phone and searched for the law firm's name. The original partnership no longer existed, but one result appeared beneath it. Advocate Nyoko Karanja, Trust and Property Law, Westlands. Werimu saved the number. Ruth touched the redevelopment notice. "What will you do?" "Ask whether these papers still mean anything, and if they do." Werimu looked at her mother's letter, then at the map of the land. "I will not let Beatrice remove people from property she may not have the right to sell." She placed the old measuring tape case beside the legal notice. For the first time, the object her mother left behind no longer felt like a memory. It felt like a key. Werimu Njeri entered the Westlands office of Advocate Nyokabi Karanja, carrying her mother's wooden box beneath one arm and a folder of copied documents against her chest. The reception area was quiet and modern, with polished stone floors, brass lamps, and framed photographs of Nairobi's older neighborhoods before glass towers changed the skyline. Through the wide windows, the city stretched beneath a pale blue sky, busy and indifferent to the questions that had kept Warimu awake. Nayo Kabi welcomed her into a private meeting room. The lawyer was a composed woman of 43, dressed in a deep green tailored suit with a narrow kitenge panel along the collar. Her desk held no unnecessary decoration, only a laptop, several labeled files, and the documents Werimu had delivered for examination. "Please sit," Nyokabi said. "I have completed the preliminary search." Warimu lowered herself into the chair, and Nyokabi did not answer immediately. She opened a thick folder and arranged several pages across the desk. "The papers your mother preserved are genuine. They refer to the Njeri Kimani Family Land Trust, established by your grandfather and 2 business partners." "So the trust still exists?" "Yes." Werimu looked down at the boundary map. "And my mother, she was registered as the beneficiary of a 46% interest." The words landed more heavily when spoken aloud. Werimu tightened her fingers around the measuring tape case in her lap. "Does that mean she owned 46% of the land?" "Not exactly. A trust separates legal control from beneficial interest. Your mother was entitled to a substantial share of income and decision-making rights, but the land itself remained under the trust structure. And after she died, her interest should have passed to you." Werimu stared at her. "Should have?" Nyokabi turned another document toward her. "The transfer was never completed. Your mother began the process, but illness interrupted it. After her death, no representative followed through with the succession filing. My aunt did not know. I believe that. The records were fragmented, and the original law firm closed after one partner retired and the other died." Werimu looked toward the window. For years, she had believed her mother left behind only a sewing machine, a measuring tape, and memories too fragile to examine closely. Now an entire legal history sat between them. "What does Mufoni Urban Estates own?" she asked. Nyokabi opened a development agreement. "The company has a long-term right to manage and develop portions of the property. It also receives an agreed share of revenue. However, it does not possess unrestricted ownership." "Can they demolish the workshops?" "Not without proper consent from the trust beneficiaries and compliance with the tenancy protections. They already sent notices. I saw them. Were those notices lawful? They may have the right to begin consultation. They do not appear to have the right to present redevelopment as a completed decision." Werimu felt anger rise, but Nyokabi's controlled tone kept her focused. "What about the new luxury project?" "That is where the matter becomes serious." Nyokabi placed a glossy development brochure on the desk. The cover showed glass residences, landscaped gardens, and women in elegant clothing walking beside an artificial pond. "The proposal assumes the company can sell long leases and use the property as security for financing," Nyokabi explained. "Under the original trust agreement, that requires beneficiary approval, and they do not have mine. They may not yet know they need yours." Werimu remembered Beatrice's confidence, the cancelled contract, and the money offered in exchange for her disappearance. Or perhaps they hoped no one would ask. Nyokabi studied her carefully. "That is possible, but we should not accuse anyone before reviewing the full corporate record. I am not interested in making accusations I cannot prove." "Good. Anger can reveal where to look, but it should not decide what we claim." Werimu nodded. "What happens now?" "We file an application to recognize you as your mother's successor. We notify the trustees and request all financial statements, lease agreements, and development approvals connected to the property." "How long will that take?" "It will not be immediate." "Will the project continue?" "We can request a temporary restriction on any sale, demolition, or financing until your rights are confirmed." Werimu's first thought was of Ruth's shop. Then she pictured the furniture makers, bead artists, tailors, and residents who had received similar notices. What happens to the people living there while the lawyers argue? Nyokabi leaned back slightly. "That depends on what remedy you seek. I do not want them removed. Even if removing them increases the value of your interest?" Werimu looked directly at her. "My mother wrote that land can feed pride as easily as it feeds families." Nyokabi's expression softened. She was wise. "She also warned me to ask who would be harmed by the way I used it. Many beneficiaries arrive here asking what they can sell. I am asking what I am responsible for." The lawyer closed the file. That distinction may become important. Werimo picked up the development brochure. The imagined future on its cover was beautiful, but it erased every person already connected to the land. There were no workshops, no fabric stalls, no homes, and no evidence that life had existed there before investors discovered its value. Can development happen without destroying everything? She asked. Yes, but it requires compromise, careful planning, and less profit than an aggressive redevelopment. Then, that is what we should examine. Nyokabi raised an eyebrow. You may be challenged by the other beneficiaries. Then they can challenge me. You may also face pressure from Muthoni urban estates. I have already met their preferred method of pressure. Nyokabi waited, but Wairimu offered no further explanation. The lawyer gathered the documents into two groups. I will prepare the succession application and preservation notice. I also recommend that you avoid discussing possible inheritance publicly. I do not plan to announce that I own an empire. You do not own an empire. Wairimu smiled faintly. That is precisely why I trust you. Before leaving, she placed her mother's letter inside the legal folder but kept the yellow measuring tape case. Nyokabi promised to contact her after reviewing the trust's financial records. At the doorway, Wairimu stopped. Advocate Karanja, if the company has reported the land as its own property, what would that mean? It could mean an accounting error, careless restructuring, or deliberate misrepresentation. We need evidence before deciding which. And if it was deliberate? Nyokabi's voice remained calm. Then, the land dispute will become the smallest part of their problem. Wairimu walked back through the elegant reception area with no feeling of sudden wealth. The truce had not given her luxury, certainty, or revenge. It had given her duty. For years, other people had made decisions because the woman with the right to question them had been missing. She was missing no longer. Kamo Muthoni entered the finance department of Muthoni Urban Estates and closed the glass door behind him. Beyond the windows, Westlands glowed beneath the late-day sun, its towers reflecting gold across the polished conference table. On the wall, architectural renderings displayed the company's most successful developments, including the proposed Muthoni Heritage Residences in Karen. Daniel Kiprono was waiting with 3 files and a troubled expression. You said this could not wait, Daniel said. It cannot. Kamal placed a copy of the preservation notice from Advocate Nyokabi Karanja on the table. Daniel read the first page, then slowly removed his glasses. Where did you get this? It was served to the legal department. Does your mother know? She knows a claim has been filed. She does not know I asked to see the older records. Daniel looked toward the closed door. That may be wise. Kamal sat opposite him. Tell me what this land actually is. Daniel opened the first file. Inside were faded agreements, valuation reports, board minutes, neat-carrying signatures from several generations of directors. The current property entered the company through a development partnership, Daniel explained. Muthoni Urban Estates financed infrastructure, managed leases, and shared revenue with the Njeri Kimani Family Land Trust, so the company never bought it. Not in the ordinary sense. Kamal's jaw tightened. Then why do our current reports list it under wholly controlled property? Daniel remained silent. Kamal leaned forward. Daniel, the classification changed during a restructuring. Who approved it? The board. That is not an answer. Daniel closed the file. Your mother approved the restructuring based on advice from outside consultants. The trust had no active representative, and the previous trustees had stopped responding. An absent beneficiary does not become a non-existent beneficiary. I know. Did you object? Daniel's eyes moved toward the city beyond the glass. I raised questions, and I was told the company had managed the land for decades, paid taxes, maintained roads, and protected its value. The legal team believed the risk was limited. Kamal picked up one of the reports. This document values the land as if we own it. Yes, it was used to support financing. Yes, and now the company plans to sell long leases against it. Daniel's silence confirmed the rest. Kamal stood and walked toward the architectural rendering. The image showed elegant residences, private gardens, and a luxury wellness center. There were no artisan workshops, rental homes, or small businesses in the design. Only opportunity, only profit. My mother said this project would secure the company's future. Kamal said, it may still be commercially successful. That is not what I asked. Daniel removed another folder from the stack. There is more. He revealed an internal memorandum written several years earlier. It warned that the beneficiary structure had never been legally resolved and recommended that no major redevelopment proceed without confirmation from the trust. Kamal read it twice. My mother received this, her office acknowledged it, and the project continued. Daniel's voice became quieter. She believed the family had invested enough money to justify control. Control is not ownership. No, why are you showing me this now? Daniel folded his hands. Because I have spent too many years calling fear professionalism. Kamal looked at him. Daniel continued. I have a family. I have employees who depend on decisions made in this department. Each time I considered pushing harder, I told myself I was protecting them. Were you? I was protecting my position. The honesty carried no pride. Kamal sat again. What happens if this becomes public? The project financing could be frozen. The company may have to restate part of its asset portfolio. Investors could demand an independent audit. And my mother, the board may restrict her authority while the matter is examined. Kamal closed the memorandum. Prepare every file connected to the trust. Daniel hesitated. That request should come through the chairperson. It is coming through the director responsible for strategic development. She can remove you. Then she removes me. Daniel studied him before nodding. Kamal carried the memorandum to his mother's office. Beatrice stood beside a marble table, examining fabric samples for the investor presentation. She wore a crimson dress with a gold-beaded collar, her posture as controlled as ever. You went to finance, she said. Yes. You had no authority to reopen archived records. I oversee the current project. You oversee strategy, not family history. This is not family history. It is a legal risk. Beatrice dismissed her assistant with a glance. When they were alone, Kamal placed the memorandum before her. You knew the trust had unresolved beneficiaries. I knew lawyers had raised questions. You presented the land as company property. We rescued that land. That does not make it ours. Beatrice's expression sharpened. When the trust stopped functioning, who maintained the roads? Who paid the taxes? Who prevented creditors from taking the land? The company did, exactly. And the company was compensated through development rights and revenue. Beatrice turned away. You speak as though we stole something. I am asking whether we benefited from someone else's silence. She was not silent, Beatrice said. She was absent. Werimu did not even know she had a claim. At the sound of Werimu's name, Beatrice faced him again. So this is about her. This is about the truth. She has already weakened your judgment. No, she exposed what my judgment had learned to ignore. Beatrice's voice became cold. I built this company while men twice my age waited for me to fail. I protected every asset because no one else would protect us. And now you are using that fear to justify doing the same thing to another woman. The words struck harder than he intended. For a moment, Beatrice looked wounded. Then the chairperson returned. If you challenge me publicly, you will lose your position. Kamal removed his company access card and placed it beside the memorandum. Then take it. Her eyes widened. You would abandon your family for a seamstress? Kamal shook his head. I am refusing to abandon my conscience for a title. He asked her to suspend the current announcement and authorize an independent audit. Beatrice refused, insisting the investor presentation would continue as planned. Kamal walked toward the door. Behind him, his mother said, loyalty should mean something. He stopped but did not turn around. It does. Loyalty means telling the truth before strangers are forced to tell it for us. Then he left the office. For most of his life, Kamal had believed courage meant defending the family name. He was beginning to understand that sometimes courage meant refusing to hide behind it. At exactly 7:18 p.m., Warimun Jerry entered the glass foyer of the Muthoni villa in Karen, carrying a slim leather folder beneath one arm. Warm light poured across the marble floor. catching the gold thread on her deep emerald gown and the faded yellow measuring tape wrapped once around her wrist. Beyond the foyer, investors, architects, and members of Nairobi's business elite gathered around illuminated models of the proposed Muthoni heritage residencies. Beatrice stood at the center of the room. She wore the turquoise silk jacket Werimu had designed for her, paired with an ivory skirt and gold acacia leaf earrings. The jacket fit perfectly. Its beaded sleeves shimmered whenever she lifted her hand to greet another guest. Werimu noticed the irony. Beatrice was wearing her craftsmanship while preparing to erase her family's claim. Kamal stood near the architectural model in a charcoal suit. He had no company badge on his lapel. When he saw Warimu, relief crossed his face, followed quickly by concern. "You came," he said. "I was invited by the lawyers. My mother does not know the notice will be delivered here. She will soon." Kamal looked at the folder in her hand. "Are you ready?" "No," Werimu replied, "but I am certain." Across the room, Zawadi Naliaka was speaking with two representatives from her investment fund. She wore a coral gown with a sculpted shoulder and a narrow belt of hand-woven fabric. When she noticed Werimu, she excused herself and approached. "I heard there may be a title issue," Zawadi said. "There is more than an issue. Does my fund know?" "That depends on what Beatrice disclosed." Zawadi's expression hardened. "She told us the company held complete development control. Then your fund did not receive the full picture." Before Zawadi could respond, Beatrice's voice rose above the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join us near the presentation area." Guests gathered around the illuminated model. Miniature glass residences stood among perfect trees and artificial ponds. The artisan workshops had vanished. So had Ruth's townhouse and every small business built there over decades. Beatrice welcomed the guests and spoke of heritage, progress, and responsible urban growth. Her words were polished, elegant, and empty of the people already living on the property. Where Rimu listened quietly, then Beatrice saw her. The older woman's expression changed for only a moment before she restored her public smile. "Werimu," she said, "I was not aware you would be attending." "I understand." Beatrice's eyes moved toward the measuring tape around her wrist. "This is a private investor presentation. Then your legal department should not have listed me as an interested beneficiary." The nearby conversation stopped. Beatrice stepped away from the model and lowered her voice. "This is neither the place nor the moment. You chose the place when you decided to announce the project here." Kamal moved closer. "Mama, suspend the presentation." Beatrice turned sharply. "You no longer have authority over this project. Neither do you until the trust claim is resolved." A murmur passed through the guests. Beatrice looked at Warimu again, the restraint in her face beginning to fracture. "You may sew garments for this family," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "but do not mistake the access for the right to interfere in matters beyond your understanding." Silence filled the glass foyer. Werimu's fingers tightened around the old measuring tape, but she did not lower her eyes. "You are right about one thing," she replied. "I understand fabric better than property development, but I understand enough to know that no one should sell what they do not own." Beatrice's face went still. Werimu placed the leather folder beside the estate model. "Before you continue this presentation, ask your lawyer why my mother's name appears on the land documents." The room seemed to narrow around them. Daniel Kiprono, standing near the financing team, looked down. One of the company's attorneys immediately approached the table. "What documents?" Beatrice demanded. Advocate Niokabi Karanja entered through the foyer doors with the process server and two members of her legal team. "These documents," Niokabi said. She handed the attorney a formal preservation notice and a certified copy of the trust records. Beatrice did not touch them. Niokabi continued calmly. "My client has filed to be recognized as successor to a 46% beneficial interest in the Njeri Kimani Family Land Trust. Until the matter is resolved, any sale, demolition, financing, or long-term lease connected to this development may be challenged." One of the investors stepped forward. "Mrs. Muthoni, was this disclosed in the project memorandum?" Beatrice looked towards her legal counsel. The attorney said nothing. Zawadi folded her arms. My fund was told the company had clear authority to proceed. The company has managed this land for decades, Beatrice replied. This is an incomplete historical claim being used to disrupt the legitimate development. Nyokabi remained composed. Then an independent review should cause no concern. Beatrice's eyes moved to Werimu. You planned this humiliation. Werimu shook her head. I asked your lawyers to pause the project privately. You refused. You are using my son to reach my company. Kamal stepped between them. No, Mama. She stepped away from me before she discovered any of this. That truth changed the room. Beatrice looked at him as though he had betrayed her. Kamal continued. Daniel found the internal memorandum. The board was warned that the beneficiary structure remained unresolved. All eyes turned toward Daniel. He straightened his shoulders. That is correct. Beatrice's voice sharpened. You work for me. I work for the company, Daniel replied. And the company needs an audit. The sentence landed quietly. It carried weight. Zawadi turned toward her investment team. We are suspending all discussions connected to this project until the ownership and disclosure issues are resolved. Beatrice stared at her. Our families have worked together for years. That is exactly why you should have told us the truth. Zawadi's voice was calm but final. A marriage cannot be arranged like an investment agreement, and an investment cannot be protected by hiding its risks. Several guests stepped away from the architectural model. Phones appeared in discreet hands. The atmosphere that had once celebrated Beatrice's vision now examined it with suspicion. Werimu felt no pleasure. Public shame had never been her goal. Beatrice looked around the room. She had controlled moments earlier and realized that control was leaving her. Her shoulder remained straight, but the confidence in her eyes had changed into something more fragile, fear. She turned to Werimu. What do you want? The question was almost an accusation. Werimu looked at the miniature residences, the false gardens, and the empty spaces where real people had been removed from the design. I want the project stopped until the records are examined. And after that, the house, the company, my position? I did not come to take your home. Then why are you here? To prevent you from signing away something you never had the right to sell. Beatrice glanced down at the turquoise jacket she wore. Every bead had been placed by the woman she had dismissed as unsuitable. Every seam had been shaped to make her appear powerful. Werimu saw the realization in her face. Skill had never been beneath wealth. It had been holding wealth together. Nyokabi asked the guests to allow the legal teams to meet privately. The company attorney led Beatrice toward the library, while Daniel began speaking with the investors. Zawadi remained beside Werimu. You could have embarrassed her more, she said. I did not come for revenge. Many people would have. Werimu looked toward Ruth, who had entered quietly behind Nyokabi and now stood near the doors in a plum and gold dress. My mother left me a responsibility, Werimu replied. Not permission to become cruel. Komal approached after the room began to clear. You were brave. Werimu looked at him. I was prepared. There is a difference. Bravery can happen once. Preparation is what keeps the truth standing afterward. Kamal nodded, accepting the correction. Behind them, the illuminated estate model continued to glow beautifully, presenting a future built on incomplete records and deliberate silence. For years, Beatrice had believed that money allowed her to decide who belonged in the room. Now, the woman she had rejected was the one person the project could not move forward without. Werimu Njeri entered the main boardroom of Muthoni Urban Estates in Westlands. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Nairobi's silver towers, while a long table of dark polished wood reflected folders, water glasses, and the restrained faces of lawyers, auditors, trustees, and company directors. Werimu wore a structured burgundy dress with gold kitenge panels at the cuffs, and her mother's faded yellow measuring tape rested inside her handbag. She had not brought it as decoration. It reminded her why she was there. Advocate Nyokabi Karanja sat beside with the finalized succession order. Across the table, Beatrice Muthoni wore an ivory suit and no jewelry except her acacia leaf brooch. Kamau sat several chairs away, no longer occupying the place reserved for the company's strategic director. The independent auditor opened the meeting. Our review confirms that Wairimu Njeri is the lawful successor to her mother's 46% beneficial interest in the Njeri Kimani Family Land Trust. No one spoke. The auditor continued. Muthoni Urban Estates holds extensive contractual development rights, but it does not own the land without restriction. Several recent reports classified the property incorrectly, and the proposed current development proceeded without complete beneficiary consent. Beatrice kept her back straight. Was fraud established? She asked. We found no forged deed transferring ownership to the company, the auditor replied. However, internal warnings were disregarded, and the asset was presented to investors with more certainty than the record supported. One director folded his hands. That exposed the company to significant liability. It also exposed the residents to removal, Wairimu said. The room turned toward her. She continued calmly. The reports discuss investors, land values, and financing. Where do they discuss the people who built workshops and businesses there? The company's attorney opened another document. The preservation order remains in effect. No demolition, sale, or new long-term financing may proceed until a revised development agreement is approved. And the eviction notices? Wairimu asked. They will be withdrawn. A breath Wairimu had been holding finally left her. Aunt Ruth would keep her home. The artisans would keep their workshops. For now, the board chair turned toward Beatrice. Mrs. Muthoni, the governance committee recommends that your authority over the land acquisitions and development approvals be suspended. You will step down from executive leadership while the financial statements are corrected. Beatrice's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened around her pen. I built this company. No one disputes that, the chair replied, but achievement does not remove accountability. Kamau lowered his eyes. Wairimu felt no triumph. She remembered the turquoise jacket, the gala contract, and the envelope intended to purchase her disappearance. Beatrice had harmed her deliberately. Yet watching the older woman lose authority did not restore what had been taken from Wairimu's mother. Punishment was not repair. Nyokabi placed a proposed settlement on the table. The trust is entitled to unpaid distributions identified during the review. The preliminary amount is 86,730,000 Kenyan shillings, subject to final tax and expense calculations. A director looked at Wairimu. Would you consider selling your beneficial interest to the company? Beatrice finally looked up. The question carried an obvious promise: money, distance, and a quick end to the conflict. Wairimu opened her mother's letter. No, Beatrice's expression shifted. You could leave this dispute with more money than your studio may earn in a lifetime. Wairimu met her gaze. That is precisely why I should not decide only by asking what benefits me. The director leaned forward. What do you propose? Wairimu opened a portfolio containing revised site plans prepared with an independent planning team. The first drawing preserved Ruth's residential row and the artisan workshops. A second showed a smaller residential development on the underused section of the property. At the center stood a modern complex built around a landscaped courtyard. This portion can still be developed commercially, Wairimu explained. The company can build premium residences, but at a reduced scale. Existing residents should receive registered long-term leases rather than informal promises. She turned another page. The central area will become the Njeri House of Craft and Design. It will include professional sewing rooms, a textile gallery, retail units for women-owned Kenyan brands, and training studios for adults rebuilding their careers. One director frowned. That lowers the projected return. It lowers the fastest possible return, Wairimu corrected. It also reduces displacement, legal risk, and public distrust. Sentiment is not a financial strategy. Neither is pretending people disappear when their land becomes valuable. Silence followed. Daniel Kiprono cleared his throat. The mixed-use plan is financially viable, he said. The margins are lower, but the income is more stable. The company would also avoid the compensation and litigation costs attached to the original project. The board chair examined the proposal. Would the trust contribute capital? Yes, Wairimu said. A portion of the recovered distributions can finance the craft center, but the accounts must be independently managed. Beatrice gave a humorless smile. You arrived here as a seamstress and now you intend to redesign an estate. Werimu did not flinch. I arrived as a beneficiary whose consent was ignored. I remain a seamstress. Beatrice looked at the plans. You could remove this family from the project entirely. I could try. Why haven't you? Because justice is not placing you beneath me, so I can enjoy the view. The words settled over the table. Werimu continued more softly. You helped increase the land's value. The company created roads, utilities, and employment. That work matters. But it does not erase my family's rights or the lives of the people already there. Beatrice's eyes moved toward her for the first time without open contempt. What do you want from me? Correct the records. Accept independent oversight. Compensate the trust. Protect the residents. Then decide whether you can remain connected to this project without needing to control every part of it. The board voted to adopt the settlement framework and begin negotiations based on Warimu's mixed-use proposal. Kamal was not automatically restored to his position. Instead, the company would open a transparent leadership process after the audit was completed. When the meeting ended, he approached Werimu near the windows. You saved the company from a worse outcome, he said. I protected the land. You also protected my mother from losing everything. Werimu looked toward Beatrice, who stood alone gathering her papers. I did not do it for her. Then why? Because becoming powerful does not excuse becoming careless with other people's lives. Kamal nodded slowly. He understood that she was speaking about more than land. Werimu placed the settlement documents inside a bag beside the measuring tape. Her inheritance had finally been recognized, but it did not feel like a prize. It felt heavy. Her mother had been right. The value of land could be written in numbers. The cost of using it badly could not. Warimu Njeri stood beneath the carved wooden entrance of the newly completed Njeri House of Craft and Design in Karen. Warm sunlight rested across the stone courtyard, where jacaranda trees framed a modern building of glass, red brick, and polished timber. Inside, sewing machines hummed beside textile looms, women arranged handmade jewelry beneath soft gallery lights, and the scent of Kenyan coffee drifted from the small cafe overlooking the garden. The land had changed, but it had not forgotten the people who belonged to it. Aunt Ruth stood near the entrance wearing a plum and gold Kitenji dress, greeting artisans who once feared losing their workshops. Achieng moved between the exhibition rooms in a cobalt blue suit embroidered with orange thread. Her first independent collection hung along an entire wall beneath a brass plaque bearing her name. She stopped beside Werimu and smiled. You are staring at the entrance again. I am checking whether it still feels real. It became real when the contractor sent the final invoice. Werimu laughed. That part felt painfully real. Ashieng looked toward the women gathering in the main training room. 24 students in the first program. 24 women, Werimu corrected. Not students. They are still learning. So are we. The women enrolled in the program ranged from experienced home tailors to former office workers rebuilding their careers. None were treated as charity cases. Each had received a practical training plan, access to professional equipment, and a pathway toward paid work or independent business ownership. Werimu had insisted on that. Opportunity without structure was only a speech. A black vehicle stopped outside the courtyard. Beatrice Muthoni stepped out without a driver opening the door for her. She wore the turquoise silk jacket Werimu had made more than a year earlier, now paired with simple black trousers and a narrow gold bracelet. There were no assistants around her, no investors, no audience arranged in advance. Achien leaned closer to Werimu. Should I stay? No. Should I pretend to leave and listen from behind the fabric display? Werimu gave her a look. I will be in the gallery, Achien said, very far from the fabric display. Beatrice crossed the courtyard slowly. Her gaze moved over the craft studios, the retail spaces, and the preserved row of workshops beyond the garden wall. You kept more of the old buildings than I expected, she said. They were still useful. The original consultants called them inefficient. The original consultants did not work inside them. Beatrice nodded, accepting the correction. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Beatrice touched the sleeve of her jacket. I nearly did not wear this. Why did you? Because refusing to wear it would have been another way of pretending your work had not mattered. Weremu studied her face. The sharp authority remained, but it no longer seemed designed to silence everyone around her. Beatrice looked toward the main building. The center is beautiful. It is functional. That sounds like your mother. Weremu's expression changed. You never met her. No, but I have read her letters in the trust archive. Weremu folded her hands. Why did you come? Beatrice inhaled slowly. To apologize without a board, a lawyer, or my son in the room. Weremu said nothing. Beatrice continued. I judged you by your studio, your rented apartment, and the family name I believed you did not have. Then, when the truth emerged, I was ashamed because you possessed rights I could not dismiss. Her voice grew quieter, but that was still the wrong lesson. Weremu watched her carefully. What was the right one? That you deserved respect before I knew anything about the land. The courtyard sounds continued around them. Laughter rose from the cafe. A sewing machine started inside the training room. Somewhere behind the building, a carpenter tested the smooth movement of a drawer. Life did not pause for the apology. That made it feel more honest. Beatrice lowered her eyes. I used my influence to cancel your contract. I offered you money to disappear. I treated your profession as evidence that you were beneath us while wearing the work of your hands on my own body. Yes, Weremu said. There was no need to soften it. I cannot undo those things, Beatrice continued. But I have approved the compensation agreement, the corrected trust records, and the independent oversight structure. I also asked the gala committee to acknowledge why your contract was removed. An acknowledgement does not return the opportunity. No. But silence would have protected me again. Weremu looked toward Achien's collection inside the gallery. I accept your apology. Relief moved across Beatrice's face. Weremu raised one hand. That does not mean we return to what existed before. I understand. Do you? I am learning. It was not a perfect answer. It was a believable one. Beatrice reached into her handbag and removed a folded document. This is not a contract, she said quickly. Weremu almost smiled. It is a letter confirming that Muthoni Urban Estates will sponsor 3 commercial units for women-owned brands selected by an independent panel. I have no seat on that panel. That was wise. I have become more familiar with oversight. The dry humor surprised Weremu. She accepted the letter, but did not open it immediately. Support should not purchase forgiveness. It does not. The funding will continue whether you forgive me or not. Weremu nodded. That mattered. After Beatrice entered the building to tour the exhibition, Kamau appeared at the edge of the courtyard. He wore a navy jacket designed by Njeri thread and form and carried no flowers, ring box, or dramatic promise. He had learned restraint. You planned this, Weremu said. No, my mother contacted you herself. You knew she was coming. I knew she hoped to. Kamau stopped several steps away, leaving the distance for Weremu to decide. He had returned to Muthoni Urban Estates through the company's open leadership process, not as chief executive, but as director of ethical development. His authority was smaller than before. His accountability was larger. The center looks extraordinary, he said. It looks busy. That is better. Weremu smiled faintly. Kamau glanced toward the training room. I owe you an apology too. You owe already. I apologized. For my mother. I did not apologize properly for myself. Weremu waited. I believed loving you privately excused my failure to defend you publicly, he said. I wanted peace so badly that I allowed you to pay for it. Her expression softened, but she did not rescue him from the weight of his words. I cannot ask you to forget that, Kamau continued. And I will not ask you to marry me because the building opened and my family finally behaved responsibly. That is a surprisingly low standard for romance. He laughed quietly. I am improving. What are you asking? For the chance to begin again, slowly, honestly. Without assuming love gives me rights I have not earned. Weremu looked through the open doors at the women gathering around the work tables. Some were examining patterns. Others were touching unfamiliar machines with cautious excitement. Her future was already moving. It did not require a man to begin. You can come inside, she said. Kamal looked surprised. That is all? The first class is starting. You can help Ruth carry the fabric boxes. He smiled. I can do that. We will see. They entered side by side, not as a triumphant couple restored by wealth, but as two adults learning whether trust could be rebuilt through repeated choices. Near the doorway, Werimu paused beside a framed display containing her mother's wooden measuring tape ape case. Beneath it, a small engraved sentence read, "What we inherit becomes meaningful through what we protect." Warimu once believed the measuring tape existed only to determine length, width, and proportion. Life had taught her otherwise. Houses could be valued, companies could be audited, and land could be divided into precise percentages. Human worth resisted every calculation. No dress had ever made Werimu deserving of respect. No inheritance had transformed her into a valuable woman. The truth had only exposed what pride had prevented others from seeing. She had always been enough. Several been enough. Several months later, Njeri House of Craft and Design had become more than a successful business. It had become a place where women rediscovered confidence they thought they had lost. Every graduate who completed the program returned to mentor another woman, creating a circle of generosity that grew stronger with every season. Beatrice quietly attended several workshops, never asking for special treatment, choosing instead to listen to stories she had once overlooked. Kamal earned back Werimu's trust through consistency rather than promises, standing beside her without trying to stand in front of her. Their relationship grew slowly, built on respect instead of rescue. Aunt Ruth often smiled as she watched young designers filling the once threatened workshops with laughter and ambition. Looking across the restored neighborhood, Werimu finally understood that her greatest inheritance had never been the land itself. It was the opportunity to leave behind a community stronger than the one her mother had entrusted to her. True worth is never measured by wealth, family status, or social influence. Respect should never be delayed until someone proves they own property or possess hidden success. Werimu's greatest victory was not inheriting valuable land, but refusing to become the kind of person who had once hurt her. She protected justice without seeking revenge, proving that integrity creates stronger foundations than power ever can. Real leadership is shown by lifting others while defending what is right. In the end, kindness guided by wisdom can transform not only one person's future but an entire community's legacy.